It was 2:47 a.m. when I made the decision. I didn't plan for it, didn't think it through. It wasn't something that built up over months or even years. No, it was in the silence of that moment, that one fleeting second when I realized the truth. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even upset. I was simply done. It didn't matter anymore. Nothing mattered. I had always prided myself on being a man who could handle things, who could control my emotions, who never let anyone see me break. But that night, I realized how fragile everything really was. The house was still, too still. The air was heavy, like it knew what was coming. I sat there, on the edge of the couch, staring at the dimly lit clock on the wall. 2:47 a.m. I hadn't even heard her come in. I didn't need to. I knew she was home. I could feel her presence in the house, but I didn't feel her with me anymore. I had never been a man who believed in fate or destiny. But that night, I felt like something had clicked into place. This wasn't a decision that needed words or explanations. It wasn't a choice that needed closure. I was leaving, and I wasn't coming back. For the past few weeks, there had been something off. I'd noticed the empty space between us, the quiet dinners, the late nights. It wasn't obvious at first. But then, one day, I came home early from work. The house was darker than usual, the blinds drawn, the silence almost suffocating. The front door was wide open, and I saw something on the counter, a letter. I didn't need to open it. The truth was already there, staring me in the face. It was her handwriting, but it wasn't a goodbye. Not exactly. It was something else, something colder, something more permanent. But I didn't need to read it. The words felt like a finality I wasn't ready to acknowledge. I walked past the letter, feeling the weight of its silence. The house felt empty, but not in the way you'd expect when someone's gone. It was emptier in the way it had been filled with nothing for so long, a hollow space that I had been ignoring. Then there was the phone call. I didn't hear it at first, but I saw her face, caught in the glow of her phone. She was sitting in the kitchen, her back turned, her voice low. The words weren't clear, but I didn't need to hear them. Her face told me everything. She was talking to someone, but the tone of her voice, the way she laughed, the way she almost whispered, those things were all too familiar. And then it clicked. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't something temporary. It was a choice. She had made it a long time ago, and now I was just the one who hadn't figured it out yet. I don't know how long I sat there, listening to the quiet hum of the house, the ticking of the clock, the occasional rustle of movement. She had no idea I was awake. But I knew she could feel me. I had become invisible to her, just like she had become invisible to me. There was no fight, no screaming. There didn't need to be. I stood up, walking silently to the hallway. I grabbed my jacket, my wallet, my keys. No explanation. No confrontation. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to ask her why. I just left. Before she could even say a word, I was gone. And when the sun rose, I wasn't there to see it. I wasn't there for the why, or the where did you go questions. I wasn't there for any of it. I simply disappeared. I think the hardest part of it all was the silence. It wasn't the kind of silence you get when you're alone or when things are peaceful. No, this was different. It was thick, oppressive, and I could feel it hanging over me like a storm cloud. I could hear every tick of the clock, every breath I took, every creak of the floorboards beneath me as I moved. It was the kind of silence that makes you question everything around you. I didn't leave right away. Not that night, at least. I couldn't. There was something about the house, something about her absence that held me in place. I knew I was already gone, mentally, emotionally, and maybe even physically, but I was still tethered to it. To her. I think I was waiting for something, a reason, an explanation, anything that would make sense of the mess I had found myself in. When I finally made the decision, it was like a switch flipped in my head. I had spent too many nights waiting for answers, asking myself if I was just imagining things. The truth had been there all along, just buried beneath layers of lies and half-truths. The kind of lies that eat at you slowly, almost imperceptibly, until one day, they're all you can see. I walked to the kitchen and opened the fridge. It felt like the most ordinary thing in the world, but there was nothing ordinary about it anymore. The empty bottles, the half-eaten takeout containers, everything was just a reminder of how little we had really shared over the past few months. How much of us had already faded into the background. I sat down at the table, staring at the untouched coffee cup. My mind was racing, replaying everything that had led up to this moment. How long had I known? How long had I been ignoring the signs? I had been too scared to ask the real questions, too terrified of what I might find. But now it was too late for fear. It was too late for anything. And then the thought hit me. What if I just left? What if I didn't say anything? What if I just walked out of here and never looked back? That's when the door creaked open, and she stepped into the kitchen. She was in her pajamas, her hair still wet from the shower, but she looked off. There was something about her that felt foreign. She had always been beautiful, but tonight, she seemed different. Her eyes were tired, and there was an unfamiliar hardness to her face. "Dan," she said softly, her voice tentative. "What's going on? Why are you sitting here all alone?" I didn't answer. I just looked at her. I wasn't angry, and I wasn't sad. I didn't feel anything, really. It was like I was watching a stranger in my own home, and I didn't know how to react to it. She took a few steps forward, her eyes scanning my face for any sign of emotion. But there was nothing. I couldn't give her anything. I had nothing left to give. "I don't know how to explain this," she continued, her voice wavering now. "But I think we need to talk." I almost laughed, but I stopped myself. Of course, we needed to talk. We needed to talk about everything. All the things we had avoided for so long. The lies, the secrets, the distance that had crept in between us like a slow poison. But I didn't want to talk. Not anymore. There were no more words left for us. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the tile floor. She flinched, as if my movement had startled her, and I could see the panic starting to rise in her eyes. She wasn't ready for this. She wasn't ready for me to be done. "I'm leaving," I said, my voice calm, almost distant. The words felt heavy in the air, like a declaration. It was the first time I had said them aloud, and the finality of it hit me harder than I expected. But there was no going back now. I had made my choice, and nothing was going to change that. Her mouth opened as if to protest, but no sound came out. She looked at me, searching my face for some sign of the man she had once known. But all she saw was a stranger. A man who had reached his breaking point. A man who was done pretending. "I'm not going to fight you," I said, my voice soft but firm. "I'm just done." She reached out, her hand trembling, but I stepped back. I couldn't let her touch me, not anymore. Not after everything. I couldn't let her be the one to keep me here, to keep me in this lie. I had to go. I had to take control of the one thing I still had left, my life. Without another word, I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door. She didn't follow me. She didn't say anything. She just stood there, frozen, as I walked out into the cold night. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The door closed behind me, and I walked away from everything. I didn't know where I was going. Not exactly. I couldn't even tell you how I ended up on that quiet street. The headlights of my car cutting through the darkness, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. But it didn't matter. Nothing mattered. The house I had once called home was miles away now, and with it, everything that had once felt certain. The hum of the engine was the only sound that kept me company as I drove aimlessly. Every street I passed felt unfamiliar, even though I had lived in this town for years. Everything seemed different in the dead of night, as if the world was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. I wasn't angry. I wasn't heartbroken. I was numb. There was a strange calmness in knowing that I had done what needed to be done. I had stopped pretending. I had stopped clinging to a version of my life that no longer existed. And yet, a part of me still wondered, was I wrong? I tried to push the thought away, but it crept back in, like a shadow I couldn't outrun. Was I wrong to walk away without a word? Was I wrong to leave her like that, without the confrontation she probably deserved? I had always been the kind of person who believed in honesty, in communication, in facing things head-on. But this felt different. It felt like I had no choice but to disappear. I didn't call anyone, didn't reach out to friends, family, or anyone who might ask questions I wasn't ready to answer. I didn't even check my phone, though I could feel it buzzing in my pocket. I knew there were messages waiting for me, texts from her, calls from people who had no idea what had just happened. I wasn't ready to hear any of it. I wasn't ready to face the fallout of my decision. Instead, I kept driving. I didn't know how long I was on the road, but eventually, I ended up by the river. The moonlight reflected off the water, casting long, eerie shadows on the shore. I parked the car, stepping out into the cold night air, and walked toward the edge. The wind tugged at my jacket, and I could hear the faint rush of the water as it flowed steadily beneath me. I stood there for a long time, staring out into the darkness. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel the urge to. It wasn't grief that I felt. It was something else, something emptier. It was the realization that I had given so much of myself to something that never truly existed. I had invested years into a relationship that, in hindsight, I could see had been crumbling for a long time. The signs had been there, so obvious, yet I had turned a blind eye. And now, here I was, standing by a river at 3 a.m., trying to make sense of it all. But there was no sense to be made. The truth had been right in front of me, like a storm I had chosen to ignore until it was too late. She had her secrets, her lies. And I had mine, my own inability to see the truth, to confront it when it first started to surface. We had both been complicit in the silence that had slowly suffocated whatever it was we had once shared. I didn't know how long I stood there, lost in my own thoughts, until I felt the buzz in my pocket again. This time, I pulled my phone out. The screen lit up, showing a message from her. "Dan, please, talk to me. I'm sorry. I swear it wasn't what you think." I didn't read any further. I didn't need to. I had already made my decision. I wasn't going back. There were no more explanations, no more apologies that could fix what had already been broken. I had left, and that was the end of it. I didn't respond. I couldn't. There was no point in dragging it out any longer. I had given her enough of my time, my energy, my patience. And now, it was time to let go. I put the phone back in my pocket and turned away from the river, my footsteps crunching against the gravel as I made my way back to the car. The night was still, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. I wasn't tied down anymore. I wasn't the man who had been living in a lie, pretending that everything was fine when it never had been. I was free. And yet, as I drove away from the river, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, was still waiting for me. The hours passed in a blur. I drove with no destination in mind, just the road unfolding before me like an endless expanse. The world outside my car window seemed to be sleeping, as though it was too tired to care about anything. But inside, my thoughts were racing, like a constant wave crashing against the shore. Every turn I made felt like a step away from something, yet I had no idea where I was going or why I felt the need to keep moving. I thought about what I'd done. I thought about her, Emma. I tried to picture her face, but it was already starting to blur. The way she looked when I walked out the door, frozen in disbelief, was the last memory I would carry with me. There was no sorrow in it, no guilt. I had prepared myself for it, and the act of walking away felt like the only logical choice left. But even as I pushed the thoughts of her to the back of my mind, I couldn't escape the feeling that something wasn't finished. The decision I had made wasn't as clean-cut as I had hoped. It felt like I had ripped a page out of a book, only to realize the rest of the story was still unfolding without me. But I wasn't going back to fix it. I had closed that chapter. There was no more to say. Still, the phone buzzed again. I hadn't looked at it in a while, but I knew what it was. Her name on the screen. A text. I took a deep breath and swiped it open, curiosity gnawing at me despite the resolve I had built up. "Dan, please. I need to understand why you're doing this. What happened to us? I miss you." I stared at the words, my fingers hovering over the screen. My thumb itched to type something back, anything that could provide some closure for her, for me. But I didn't. The words didn't come, and I realized that nothing I could say would change anything. There was no more us. That was the truth I had to face. I tossed the phone into the passenger seat. It wasn't about her anymore. It wasn't about what she needed or what she thought she could fix. I had done what was best for me, and that was all that mattered now. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I wondered if she'd ever understand. If she'd ever realize the weight of what she'd done, the things she had hidden from me. But as I turned the volume up on the radio, drowning out the silence of the car, I knew it didn't matter. I wasn't waiting for her to figure it out. I wasn't waiting for any more apologies or explanations. It was over, and I was moving on. The night grew darker as I continued down the highway, the headlights cutting through the endless stretch of road. A small part of me thought about going back, about finding a place to sleep, maybe even calling one of my old friends. But then I remembered the look on her face when I left. The way she seemed so small, so helpless. She wasn't waiting for me to come back. She wasn't waiting for a conversation, either. She was already moving on, just in a different way. I stopped at a gas station, needing to clear my head. The fluorescent lights flickered above me as I filled up the tank. A man in a truck pulled up beside me, and I overheard him laughing with someone on his phone. The sound of someone else's normal life felt like a cruel reminder of how far I had fallen. How far she had fallen. I wasn't sure what I was looking for anymore. Answers? Closure? A reason to stop running? But I didn't find anything at the gas station. Just emptiness. Just another stop in the journey I had started the moment I walked out that door. I paid for the gas, got back in the car, and drove. I didn't know where I was headed, but I knew I couldn't go back. The past had been left behind, sealed away in that house. There was no returning to it. The man who had lived there, who had loved her, was gone. The road stretched on, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was heading towards something new, something unknown. But as the miles passed, I knew I wasn't ready for it. Not yet. I wasn't sure if I would ever be. But in that moment, as the darkness swallowed the world outside my car, I was free. And that was the only truth I needed to hold on to. It was the silence that haunted me the most. As the hours passed, the world outside my car blurred into the darkness. No radio stations. No background noise. Just me and my thoughts, rolling like a relentless tide crashing against everything I had once known. I didn't know where I was going, or why I was even still moving. I wasn't running from her, not exactly. I wasn't running from the house, the life we'd built together. I was running from the truth that I had ignored for too long, the truth that had been right in front of me, in plain sight, but I had chosen not to see it. I had been comfortable in my ignorance, telling myself that everything would work itself out if I just waited long enough. But waiting never solved anything. And now, as the darkness wrapped around me like a suffocating blanket, I couldn't avoid it anymore. I had lived a life of avoidance, avoiding confrontation, avoiding the uncomfortable truths, avoiding the pain. And look where that got me. Sitting in a car at 5 a.m. with nothing but the sound of my heartbeat and the hum of the engine to keep me company. A part of me wanted to scream. A part of me wanted to pull over and tear apart everything I had kept locked away inside. But I didn't, because that was the last thing I wanted. There was no going back. That much I knew. But even now, as the first hint of dawn began to break through the horizon, there was a part of me still tethered to the life I had left behind. I tried to shake it off, but it wouldn't go. I was done with her. Done with the lies. Done with pretending that everything was okay when it clearly wasn't. The woman I had loved, the woman I thought I knew, had been a stranger to me for months now. I had been too blind to see it, but I couldn't deny it anymore. I pulled into a small diner, my tires screeching as I parked haphazardly in front of the entrance. The place was empty except for a few scattered truckers and a waitress who didn't even look up when I walked in. The stale smell of coffee hung in the air, mixing with the scent of old grease. But at that moment, it didn't matter. Nothing did. I sat at the counter, ordered a coffee, and just stared at the mug in front of me. I didn't know what I was hoping to find here, in this rundown diner in the middle of nowhere. A moment of clarity? A sign that what I had done was the right choice? I didn't have the answers. Hell, I wasn't even sure if I wanted them anymore. The waitress poured my coffee, giving me a quick, polite smile before retreating to the back. I stared at the cup, watching the steam rise, feeling its warmth in the pit of my stomach. It was comforting, but it wasn't enough to fill the emptiness that had settled in me. I glanced at the clock on the wall. 5:30 a.m. Time seemed to stretch and bend in the early hours of the morning. I had left my life behind, but I hadn't truly left her behind. Not yet. Not fully. The message from her still sat in my phone, unopened, unread. I wasn't ready to face it. I wasn't ready to admit that even though I had walked out of that house, a part of me still wanted to go back. I picked up my phone. My hands trembled slightly, but I ignored it. The message blinked at me, her name in bold letters. A voice inside my head told me to just delete it, to forget it. But I couldn't. I tapped the screen and opened the message. Dan, please. I don't know what happened. I never meant for it to end this way. I love you. Please, come home. I stared at the words for what felt like an eternity. There was no anger in her words. No blame. Just desperation. It wasn't the kind of message I had expected. I thought it would be a plea for forgiveness, or worse, an accusation. But instead, it was an honest request. She was reaching out, trying to pull me back in, trying to fix what we had broken. But I couldn't fix it. Not anymore. The truth had already broken everything, and no amount of apologies or tears would change that. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Instead, I set the phone down on the counter, pushing it away from me like it was a stranger's device, something I had no connection to. I wasn't that man anymore. The man who could be swayed by a text, by a woman who had already chosen her path. I had chosen mine. I took a long sip of my coffee and looked out the window. The world was waking up, and so was I. But I wasn't waking up to her. I wasn't waking up to the life we had built together. I was waking up to myself. And that was the only thing that mattered. The road stretched out before me, empty and wide. The further I drove, the more I felt like I was shedding pieces of myself along the way. It was as though every mile was pulling me away from the person I had been, the life I had lived. But with each passing minute, I felt lighter. The weight of the decision was still there, pressing on my chest, but it wasn't suffocating anymore. I had left everything behind, and for the first time in a long time, I could breathe. The morning sun was rising, casting a pale orange light across the horizon. It was beautiful, in a way that felt almost cruel. How could the world keep turning so normally when everything I knew was falling apart? It didn't make sense, but maybe that was the point. Life didn't care about your struggles. The earth would keep spinning, and the sun would rise, indifferent to your heartbreak. I thought about her again, Emma. Her face kept appearing in my mind, like a ghost that wouldn't leave me alone. I saw her in my memories, in the little things, the way she used to smile when she looked at me, the way her laugh used to fill the silence between us. Those were the things I missed, the things I thought would always be there. But now, they felt like a distant dream. A dream I wasn't sure I wanted to wake up to. The silence in the car was only interrupted by the soft hum of the tires on the road. I couldn't bring myself to turn the radio on. I didn't need distractions. I needed clarity. I needed to make sense of what had happened. But clarity wasn't coming. At that moment, I pulled into a small town. It was one of those places you drive through without a second thought, quiet, sleepy, almost forgettable. But something about it felt like a pause, a place to stop and take a breath. I parked near a small diner, the neon lights flickering as if they too were exhausted. The town didn't seem to care that it was morning. People were still hidden behind closed doors, unaware of the storm I had just walked away from. I walked inside, the bell above the door ringing with a familiar jingle. The place was nearly empty. A few truckers sat at the counter, drinking their coffee and reading the paper, their faces creased with the years of hard work. I chose a booth in the corner and sat down, the leather seat creaking beneath me. A waitress with a tired smile came over, taking my order without much enthusiasm. "Just coffee," I said. I didn't feel like eating, didn't feel like doing much of anything, really. The coffee arrived quickly, black and strong, just the way I liked it. I wrapped my hands around the mug, trying to savor the warmth. But even the comfort of the coffee couldn't settle the storm inside me. I looked around the diner, studying the other patrons. They were strangers, their lives unknown to me. But in that moment, I envied them. They had routines, lives that seemed certain. They had someone to go home to, someone who would notice if they were gone. The thought of that felt alien to me now. What did I have left? The waitress came back to check on me, her face drawn with the weight of her own invisible burdens. "You doing okay?" she asked, her voice gentle but tired. I wondered how many times she'd asked that question in her life, and whether anyone had ever really answered her. "I'm fine," I said, my voice flat. It was the answer everyone expected, the answer I had been giving for years. She gave me a soft smile, nodded, and walked away. I didn't want to be asked how I was doing. I didn't want to answer. I didn't even want to feel anything anymore. But I knew that wasn't realistic. The emotions were there, buried just below the surface. I could feel them rising, threatening to break through. I looked down at my phone, still sitting in front of me on the table. The screen was dark, but the memory of Emma's last text was still there, burning in my mind. I wanted to reach for it, to reply, to end this madness. But I couldn't. I had already made the choice. And that choice had to be final. As the waitress refilled my coffee, I noticed the clock on the wall. 7:45 a.m. Time had lost its meaning. I wasn't sure what I was waiting for anymore. Was I waiting for her to reach out again? Was I waiting for a sign that I hadn't made a mistake? I didn't know. I finished my coffee in silence, my mind still racing. When I stood up to leave, I paid the bill and slipped a few extra dollars into the tip jar. I wasn't sure why. Maybe because I was trying to hold on to something human in a world that suddenly felt so cold. I stepped outside, the cool air hitting my face, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt the weight of the world pressing in on me again. The town was still quiet, still unaware of what had just happened. But I wasn't the same person who had walked into that diner. I had left my past behind, and now I was ready to step into the unknown. The road ahead seemed endless, but maybe that was okay. Maybe the endlessness was exactly what I needed. I got back in the car and drove. No destination, no map, just the road and me. The past was behind me, and the future was somewhere ahead, waiting to unfold. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready to see where it would take me. As I continued to drive, the road ahead began to twist and turn in ways that felt almost symbolic, as if the universe itself was testing me. The sun had fully risen by now, and the warm glow bathed everything in a way that almost made it seem like life was normal again. But the more I looked out at the world, the more I realized how much I had changed in such a short time. The man I was when I left that house was gone. The man who had believed in things like loyalty, trust, and love was no more. I couldn't help but wonder if I had ever really known who I was, or if I had just been going through the motions all these years. Had I been so caught up in keeping things smooth, in keeping the peace, that I never truly saw what was happening? I had always been the type to avoid conflict, to bury anything uncomfortable deep down and just move forward. But no amount of avoidance could have prepared me for this. The wreckage of my life, scattered across the ground, was something I couldn't ignore anymore. The phone buzzed again. I had already shut it off earlier, but something told me I needed to face it. I reached for it, hesitating just for a moment, as if the decision to open her message would somehow change everything again. I unlocked the screen, the letters staring back at me like a reminder of everything I had left behind. Dan, I don't know how to fix this. I miss you so much. Please, we need to talk. I'm sorry for everything. I need you. I read it once, twice, but the words didn't seem to hold the weight they once did. I felt a pang in my chest, but it wasn't enough to sway me. I knew her. I knew that her sorry wasn't the answer to everything. It was just a word that had lost its meaning a long time ago. I thought back to the last time we had really talked, if you could even call it that. It had been a while, but the memory was fresh. She had always been so good at hiding things, always so careful with her words, until she couldn't hide it anymore. The truth had come out like a flood, and no amount of apologies could undo the damage that had already been done. I had tried to keep my distance, to make her understand, but she didn't want to hear it. The lies were too comfortable for her, and somewhere deep down, I knew that I had been lying to myself, too. I shut the phone off again, shoving it into the glove compartment. I didn't need to look at it anymore. The past was behind me, and there was no use in dragging it along like a weight I wasn't strong enough to carry. Hours passed. The roads blurred together, and I lost track of where I was. The landscape had changed, no longer city streets or familiar suburban roads, but open fields and dense forests that seemed to stretch on forever. There was a freedom in it, in the open expanse that felt endless. It was just me and the road, with nothing but the sound of my breath and the engine to keep me company. I wasn't sure if I was looking for something, or if I was simply trying to outrun everything I had left behind. It didn't matter. The idea of being out there, of not having to answer to anyone, of not having to explain myself to anyone, it was intoxicating. I was free, but that freedom didn't come without its price. I pulled off the highway, feeling the urge to stretch my legs. There was a small rest stop up ahead, a few parked trucks, and a couple of cars scattered around. It was the kind of place you stop when you need to get out and clear your mind. I parked near the entrance, turned off the engine, and stepped out of the car. The air was fresh, crisp, and I felt it fill my lungs as I stood there for a moment, letting the world settle around me. I needed to make a decision. I needed to decide what I was going to do next. But the longer I stood there, the more I realized that the decision wasn't as simple as I had hoped. Leaving Emma had been easy. Walking away from the life we had built was easy, even though it didn't feel that way at the time. The hardest part wasn't walking out. It was the moments like this one, when I was alone with my thoughts, when the gravity of what I had done started to sink in. I had lost her. That much was clear. But what about me? What had I lost? Had I lost my sense of self, my identity in the process? Or had I simply reclaimed something I had given away too easily? I wasn't sure if I could answer that yet. Maybe I wasn't supposed to. I walked toward the small convenience store attached to the rest stop, my footsteps echoing in the stillness. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sterile light over the rows of snacks and drinks. I grabbed a bottle of water, paid, and went back outside, sitting on the hood of my car. The sun was higher in the sky now, the world moving forward while I remained suspended in this strange limbo. I thought about the life I had left behind. I thought about Emma and whether I would ever hear from her again. But there was a part of me that already knew the answer. She had always been more certain of things than I was. And now, as I sat there, trying to figure out my next move, I realized something. It didn't matter what she thought anymore. It didn't matter if she missed me or needed me. What mattered was that I needed to stop looking backward. I had to stop clinging to the past like it was something I could fix. There were no more apologies. There were no more what-ifs. This was my life now, and I was going to live it, even if I had no idea where it was headed. The day began to shift as I sat on the hood of my car, the warm sun now fully embracing the world around me. The heaviness that had clung to my chest for so long was slowly starting to fade. The longer I sat there, breathing in the fresh air and listening to the soft sounds of the world coming alive, the more I realized something. I was free. Free in a way I had never been before. Not just from Emma, not just from the life I had built, but free from the expectations I had placed on myself. For the first time, I wasn't carrying anyone else's weight. I wasn't trying to fix a broken relationship or hold on to something that had already slipped through my fingers. I wasn't playing the role of the person everyone expected me to be. I was just me, and that was more than enough. As I sat there, I thought about the future. For so long, I had been trapped in the cycle of doing what was expected, following a path that I thought was the only one for me. But now, with the open road ahead and nothing but possibility, I realized that I could carve out my own path. I could decide who I wanted to be, what I wanted to become. And that thought, that simple realization, filled me with a sense of peace that I had long been missing. I pulled myself off the hood of the car and stretched, feeling the muscles in my back loosen as I stood. I wasn't sure where I was going, but for the first time in a long time, I didn't need to know. The road ahead was mine to explore, and I was ready to take it on, step by step. I drove on, the endless horizon ahead of me no longer a reminder of everything I had lost, but a promise of everything I could gain. There were no more questions. There were no more doubts. I was no longer looking back. I was moving forward. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in rich hues of orange and purple, I felt a sense of hope that I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. I wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long time, I was excited to find out. Maybe I was still a little broken, still carrying the remnants of a life that had slipped away, but I wasn't defined by it. I was defined by the choices I was making now, in this moment. And I knew that no matter what, I had the strength to build something new, something better. The road stretched out before me, vast and full of promise, and I was ready to meet it head-on. The past was behind me, but the future? It was mine to create, and that was a freedom I would never take for granted again.